You want to
I'm
talk
not a
about that
creative.
real quick? Because I saw that story. That was like a mainstream story. Was somebody suing John Deere for the right to repair, and you're a John Deere repairman. I meant to ask you that.
Yeah, I mean, like essentially, this entire thing is they're scapegoating John Deere in this whole scenario, but like it's really kind of like a great reset, kind of commie takeover of the industry in general. Is because it's not as if like really that John Deere is like roping you into like where you can't do anything to repair your equipment like without taking it to a John Deere dealer, which is kind of the way that they're portraying it. But if you look at the what's in these bills, these right to repair bills, essentially it eliminates any kind of independent dealer, any kind of independent parts dealer, or any kind of independent service dealer. There's so much regulation in the industry already that it's almost like there is a global control over all kinds of things that are mechanical, right? Like so, we have the Society of Engineers that determine like our CAN bus and even just our bolt size and all this kind of stuff. And it's just hilarious how the media is picking out one particular manufacturer when really all these things are things that have been implemented by the government themselves. Like the reason why an individual user can't go into a computer system on a John Deere tractor per se and replace a emission sensor himself and then program that emission sensors into the computer. The reason that exists is because the government, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency made a law that said that the manufacturer of the engine has to make sure that the manufacturer of the engine is the only one that's allowed to replace the sensor in the system, and the end user can't have it. It can't service this particular sensor. And then now we have this entire movement of people that think that it's John Deere per se that is the one that is saying, well, you're not allowed to repair your tractor because only John Deere can repair this tractor, and think that appealing to the government is a way to remedy this problem when the government is the one that implemented this problem in the first place, which is just a longer evolution of what's been going on in diesel industry for really since 1996 when they implemented the tier emissions program, and then so we're at tier 4 now, and we're going to evolve into tier 5 soon. But basically, this has really just choked the entire industry to where it's going to be very easy for overarching government agency to come in and just regulate all things that run on diesel fuel. And that's the way that I see that this whole right to repair thing is going towards, because it's not even fair, because you look at other things like Apple iPods or uh, Dell computers, or every industry has these kind of proprietary technology, and they shouldn't be responsible to give the end user 100% accessibility to be able to modify these things. And it's not even that important when you're talking about iPhones, but when you're talking about giving the end user of a piece of power equipment like a 600 horsepower tractor going down the road, the end user doesn't necessarily need to have the ability to be able to change everything within that programming, especially when the government is mandating that the manufacturer does not allow that the end user be able to modify any of these things in these parameters that they are mandating. So it's really just kind of this whole dialectic thing going on in this whole industry, to where farmers are getting mad because they have to pay a technician to come out from a dealership to fix some certain problem, and they think they should have access to it. But in general, they do have access to it. Like you can purchase all the software, you can purchase the data links. In general, the entire system runs off in an international system from the SCE called J1939. Like the entire system is mandated through all manufacturers that manufacture any kind of equipment that runs on diesel engines. So like the entire thing is like it's an entire mute argument. But then it like the mainstream media blows it up into this huge thing to where like they think farmers are revolting against John Deere because John Deere is this evil fascist company that is preventing farmers from fixing their equipment. Okay, well, like I mean, it's not preventing somebody from fixing anything mechanical on the tractor. You know, like the only things that are restricted from the end user repairing are the things that the government has mandated that the manufacturer not allow the end user of the equipment be able to repair themselves.
Do you
So like it,
do you think that that's going forward? Like you said, there's like tiers. Like
yeah,
you're going into the 5th tier soon.
yes.
Well, first, do you think does that have any correlation with like 5G since we're going into the 5th iteration of the Wi-Fi? And now you're
It
saying
definitely could, and I mean, I've talked
5G
about this before because tier four final, we had 3 iterations of tier 4. But Tier 4 Final really is what introduced diesel exhaust fluid into the systems. So through the whole world, the diesel, you had this whole thing evolved in different time scales. So it hit like commercial and general use stuff earlier, right? So like trucks and over-the-road trucks had to have diesel exhaust fluid before like off-road equipment. So like the right to repair thing right now has to do with like off-road equipment. So that's where off-road equipment within the past 4 or 5 years has entered Tier 4 final to where, but there was like, stipulations like engines could have been built, years ago and that were still in like a warehouse waiting to be put onto a piece of equipment. And they could still fall under like Tier 4 interim or Tier 3. But as soon as Tier 4 final hit, everything had to be over a certain horsepower limit. Everything had to have the diesel exhaust fluid system on it, essentially, for most part. Most all manufacturers had to inject. So to save the environment, we create this whole new system, this whole new control system that goes on these trucks that injects the fluid into the exhaust system, that injects it into precious metals, that basically creates a chemistry set, and it converts what they call as a bad chemical coming out of the engine called NOx, nitrites, nitrous oxide emissions and stuff like that. And it combines with this fluid. But this fluid that we inject into it, the DEF fluid, is urea. And this urea injection system is something that had been put into implementation before in major use throughout factories due to climate change regulation. So all these, whether it was places that like burn trash or create power, incinerators, or factories that have lots of NOx emissions or nitrates of oxygen emissions, had to have this SCR DEF system, which selective catalytic reduction. So like the emissions that come out of a smokestack of factory have to go through this catalyst, which is a combination of like platinum and cadmium and all these different kind of precious metals that have to be mined from somewhere. But now we have to inject this fluid that interacts with it and causes a chemistry change that binds to the nitrates of oxygen, and then it's supposed to release, just non-harmful stuff. But it just so happens that the official revelation of what Project Bluebeam is, one of the main emissions that they need to have in the environment in able to create the aerogel, the nanoparticulate aerogel, is this combination that's created with the injection of urea into these systems. So it almost connects to, and this is kind of going with the trucker thing, is what I'm saying is like there's something big that's going to happen in Ottawa. There's something weird that's going to be happening in auto. We have all these diesel trucks that are all colonnaded on this particular area, and a lot of them have DEF systems in them that are emitting this urea that interacts to be able to create this nanoparticulate aerogel. And when you produce this nanoparticulate aerogel is when you can project these quote unquote Bluebeam holographic projections into the sky. So it's not that they needed to be, they didn't have to have a fleet of airplanes dumping this chemical. They convinced the entire industry of engine manufacturers that they needed to start injecting this chemical into the exhaust stream of every vehicle that's operating in the country to produce this emission that interacts with whatever they're spraying from what we would call chemtrails.
So basically, you're saying there's a connection between the fifth iteration of the what is it, like EPA standards?
Emissions control for diesel. Yeah, emissions
diesel
control.
engines.
EPA mandated. Yeah.
With the fifth generation of the 5G technology, whatever. And then,
yeah, it's the whole entire thing is all related to each other as the way that the system would work.
Is there anything to do, like, as they continue this EPA? Are they leading it, or does it already have, maybe people don't know, like, leading it into, like, kill switches built into these things?
Yeah, 100%. They're in. That pretty much already exists. Okay. In all the new iterations for basically any kind of engine that runs any kind of internal combustion or electric driven that runs on any kind of the new standards, yeah, I mean, it all can be remotely shut down.
And then, all this exhaust is what's going to be needed to create a Bluebeam. So it's like a chemtrail or something, but it's being from the ground.
It's essentially there's a lot of chemistry that goes into it, so they need multiple experiments going at one time to be able to produce all the reactions that they need to happen. So it just, and the product of the urea in the SCR system is just like one part of the system, but and it might not even be true, right? But I mean, like, it's just like this is a part of the official, fiction of whatever Bluebeam is, right? Like, but I don't know, the way I look at it, I don't know anybody else that has ever highlighted this part of it, but this urea injection into the SCR system is part of the NASA documents onto what this holographic projection of whatever Bluebeam would be. So it's involved with it some way or another.